Hello, and welcome to this deep dive from Westferry Times. I'm Emily, and really glad you could join us today.
Thank you for having me.
We're tackling a really big topic, the state of social mobility here in the UK.
hmm
There's this long-standing idea, maybe you'd call it the British dream,
You could. Yeah.
that, if you work hard, you've got talent, you can get anywhere, no matter where you start from.
That's the ideal, certainly.
But is that actually true today? Is that ladder still there for everyone to climb?
It's a crucial question.
To help us unpack all of this, we're very pleased to have Dr. James Carter with us. He's a leading sociologist and the director of the Center for Social Futures at the University of Leeds. Welcome.
Thank you, Emily. It's vital we talk about these things.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. When we talk about social mobility, what exactly are we getting at, and how do we even measure it in the UK?
Okay, so at its core, social mobility is really about movement, how individuals or families move between different social or economic positions.
Yeah.
And that could be across someone's own lifetime. Or, more commonly, we look at it between generations, comparing parents to their children.
Okay, so comparing generations and the measures.
Yeah, here in the UK, we typically look at, well, income is a big one, education level, the qualifications people get, and occupation, the kind of jobs they end up in.
And the ideal scenario is?
The ideal is simple, really. Where you start in life shouldn't lock you into where you finish. Your background shouldn't determine your future.
Okay. So how does the UK actually look right now against that ideal?
Well, sadly, the UK faces some pretty big challenges here.
Cool.
Compared to a lot of other developed countries, our levels of what we call intergenerational mobility are quite low.
Meaning?
Meaning there's a strong link between how well off your parents were and how well off you end up being.
So it's quite sticky then, your starting point.
Very sticky. To put it bluntly, if you're born into a working class family today, your chances of getting into those higher income jobs, professional roles, they're statistically much lower than for someone from a middle or upper class background.
Wow.
It really makes you ask, doesn't it? Does that picture resonate with what you see around you? Maybe even, in your own experience.
Yeah, it's a powerful point. And often education is held up as the key, right? The great leveler, the way to break that cycle.
That's the common perception, yes. And education is still incredibly important, let's be clear.
But there's a but coming, I feel.
There is a but. The playing field just isn't level. Access to good education and the outcomes you get from it are unequal.
How so?
Well, think about it. Kids from wealthier families often have, well, a head start. They're more likely to be in areas with high-performing schools, maybe get private tutoring,
Right.
and then they have a clearer path, often into the top universities. Research consistently flags the funding gaps between schools in richer and poorer areas.
Yeah.
That matters.
And for those without those initial advantages, what hurdles do they hit?
Oh, the hurdles start early, even before school, in the early years. Differences in access to quality nursery care, even just the resources and stimulation at home, it all adds up.
It starts that young.
It really does. And then as they go through school, thinking about uni, it's not just about being clever enough.
What else comes into play?
We talk about something called cultural capital.
Okay, cultural capital. What's that?
It's like the unwritten rules, knowing how to present yourself, how to talk, how to network in certain environments like elite universities or certain professions.
So confidence, connections.
Exactly. Even things like your accent sometimes. These aren't things you necessarily learn in a classroom. They often come from your upbringing, your family's background.
So it's not just about raw talent, but knowing how to navigate these privileged spaces.
Precisely. It's about understanding the codes. Have you ever noticed that yourself? How certain ways of speaking or carrying yourself just seem to, well, fit better in some places?
Definitely. Which brings us nicely to this idea of the class ceiling. What exactly is that?
The class ceiling is that invisible barrier. It stops people from working class backgrounds moving up, even when they've got the qualifications, the degree, the job.
So they get in, but they can't get on?
That's a good way to put it. It shows up in different ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's unconscious bias in who gets hired or promoted.
Right.
Sometimes people just don't fit the company culture. They don't have the same informal networks, maybe didn't go to right school or university.
And that holds them back.
It can, yeah. And there's even evidence, depressingly, that people from working class backgrounds sometimes get paid less for doing the exact same job as colleagues from more privileged backgrounds.
Really? For the same role?
Yes. It's quite shocking.
Can you maybe give us an example, make it a bit more concrete?
Sure. Let's imagine someone Really bright working class kid gets into a top law firm, great achievement, but then maybe they find they're subtly kept away from the big clients, perhaps because of their accent, or because they didn't go to Oxbridge,
Mm.
or they feel this constant pressure to code switch.
Code switch.
Yeah, like changing how you speak, how you act, to kind of blend in with the dominant, often middle-class culture of the workplace.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. It takes a huge emotional toll,
Mm-hmm.
and it stops people bringing their whole authentic selves to work, which ultimately limits their potential.
Yeah.
Does that sort of scenario ring any bells, maybe in other professions you can think of?
Yeah, I can imagine variations of that. Let's shift gears slightly. How much does where you grow up matter? The geography of it
Oh,
all.
hugely. Massively. That phrase, postcode is destiny.
I've heard that.
Hadley, it still holds far too much truth in the UK. There are definite regional disparities.
Which areas tend to lag behind?
Well, consistently, we see regions like the Northeast, the West Midlands, parts of Wales too, facing bigger challenges. Fewer opportunities generally.
And that's not just about jobs, is it?
No, absolutely not. It's broader than that. It's access to good health care, decent public transport, even things like social capital, the networks and community support that can help people get ahead.
Okay. Now, the government's talked a lot about leveling up to tackle this. What's your assessment of that? Is it likely to make a real difference to social mobility?
Well, the intention behind leveling up,
Yeah.
aiming to reduce those geographic inequalities is definitely the right one. It's commendable.
But the execution.
The execution has been patchy, let's say that. And what we really need is sustained long-term investment, not just in shiny infrastructure projects, but in the fundamentals,
Like what?
like consistently improving schools in those areas, building genuinely affordable housing, fostering local economies that offer diverse, quality jobs. It needs deep structural change.
Not just quick fixes.
Exactly. Past attempts at regional development show us that a piecemeal approach just doesn't cut it for shifting something as ingrained as poor social mobility. It needs a long-term view.
Looking across society, are there any groups who are managing to climb that ladder, despite all these barriers we've discussed? Anyone bucking the trend?
We do see some relative success stories. For instance, some studies show that children of immigrants often achieve significant upward mobility, partly perhaps due to a very strong focus on education.
Okay, that's interesting.
But even there, it's not always straightforward. Often, that progress kind of stalls around middle management.
Really? Why is that?
It suggests there might be other factors at play, maybe an intersection of race and class, creating further hurdles higher up the ladder.
Right, so multiple layers of disadvantage. What about women, specifically women from working class backgrounds?
They often face what you could call a double disadvantage.
Gender and class bias.
Precisely. We've seen overall educational attainment rise massively for young women, which is great.
Yeah.
But when you look at who holds the top leadership roles, who gets the highest pay,
Yeah.
it's still disproportionately skewed towards men, particularly men from more privileged backgrounds.
So progress in education doesn't automatically translate into equal progress in careers.
Not automatically, no. It shows we need to tackle these different forms of inequality together. Does that resonate with, say, things you've seen in professional life?
It certainly gives you pause for thought. So, Dr. Carter, let's bring this all together. The big question we started with. Is social mobility basically dead in the UK? Is the British dream over?
I wouldn't say it's completely dead, but it is severely weakened, critically injured, perhaps.
Okay.
That ideal we talked about, the meritocracy where talent and hard work are all that matter. It's just not the reality for so many people. Privilege is still deeply entrenched.
The odds are stacked against those starting at the bottom.
Significantly stacked, yes.
Yeah.
Far more than they should be in a society that claims to be fair.
So, what would it actually take to fix this? To
Hmm.
breathe life back into social mobility? What needs to happen?
It needs bold action, not just tinkering around the edges. We need a whole package of measures, really.
Like what? Give us the headlines.
Okay. First, education funding. It needs a fundamental rethink, maybe redistribution, to ensure every child gets a high-quality start, no matter their postcode.
Right. Makes sense.
Second, massive investment in early years care, closing those gaps that open up before kids even start school.
Crucial.
Third, serious reform of hiring and promotion practices. We need to actively design bias out and focus on actual potential, not just cultural fit or polish.
Get past the surface stuff.
Exactly. Fourth, we have to tackle wealth inequality, not just income inequality. Inherited wealth plays a huge role in locking in advantage across generations.
That's a big one.
It is. And finally, maybe less tangible, but just as important, we need to dismantle the stigma that can still attach to having a working class background. Celebrate different paths, value different
Now it
experiences.
sounds substance over style.
You can put it that way. Focus on potential, wherever it comes from.
Dr. James Carter, this has been incredibly insightful, illuminating, if also quite sobering, frankly. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Thank you, Emily. It's a conversation we absolutely need to keep having. It's urgent.
Agreed. And thank you all for joining us for this deep dive from Westferry Times. We really appreciate you spending your time with us today.
Yes, thank you.
If you found this discussion valuable, maybe share it with family or friends. And do consider subscribing to the Westferry Times YouTube channel for more deep dives like this one.
Please do.
Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and we'll catch